Night of the Living Dead. In 1968's groundbreaking zombie film, Ben emerges as the sole survivor of an undead apocalypse, only to be shot dead by the militia meant to rescue him. George A. Romero's revolutionary low-budget horror follows Ben, played by Dwayne Jones, as he spends the entire night defending a farmhouse from a relentless zombie horde, boarding up windows, rationing supplies, and protecting other survivors. By morning, a rural militia sweep moves through the area. Hearing them outside, Ben cautiously emerges from the house. In the chaos and distance, the men mistake him for a ghoul and shoot him in the head. His body is hooked and thrown onto a bonfire with other corpses, with still photographs lingering on his anonymous corpse. Ben survives the supernatural threat, but dies because of human error, turning what looked like a victory into a bleak commentary on how easily society destroys its own heroes. The cruel punchline is that, in this world, even surviving the monsters is not enough to save you from the people in charge. Braveheart. Mel Gibson's war epic ends with Scottish rebel William Wallace executed in one of the most brutal punishments in English history. The film follows Wallace, played by Mel Gibson, during the late 1300s and early 1300s wars of Scottish independence, as he leads a guerrilla campaign against English rule. After betrayal and capture, he is brought to London and convicted of high treason. Historically, traitors were hanged, disemboweled, beheaded, and quartered, a process the film partially depicts. Wallace is publicly tortured in front of a jeering crowd but refuses to beg for mercy. In the film, he uses his final breath to cry "freedom" before the axe falls. Records indicate his head was displayed on London Bridge and his limbs sent to different Scottish towns as a warning. The ending shows Wallace dying without seeing Scotland freed in his lifetime, but his death ignites the rebellion that will carry on without him. It is a dark, uncompromising end where the hero's body is destroyed, yet his cause becomes larger than he is. Titanic. James Cameron's 1997 blockbuster concludes with its romantic lead freezing to death in the Atlantic after ensuring the woman he loves survives. Jack Dawson, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, is a penniless artist who wins a ticket aboard the RMS Titanic and falls in love with Rose DeWitt Bukater, played by Kate Winslet. When the ship strikes an iceberg and begins to sink, Jack fights through the chaos to get Rose to safety, ultimately finding a floating wooden panel that can only support one person without sinking. He keeps Rose on top while he remains submerged in the freezing water, eventually losing consciousness as hypothermia sets in. Rose tries to rouse him but realizes he has died, and she lets his body slip into the depths before signaling a lifeboat. Jack's death is the emotional core of the movie. He gives up his life for Rose's future, turning their love story into a tragedy that millions of viewers still remember. Thelma and Louise. Ridley Scott's road movie ends with two women choosing death over surrender to a system that has trapped them their entire lives. Thelma, played by Gina Davis, and Louise, played by Susan Sarandon, start with a simple weekend trip that spirals out of control after Louise kills a man who is assaulting Thelma in a parking lot. Fearing the justice system will never see the context of the sexual assault, they run, committing robberies and other crimes as they are pursued by police. In the final scene, law enforcement forces them to a dead stop at the edge of a canyon, with police cars and officers ready to arrest them. Faced with imprisonment and losing all control, they choose a different route. They hold hands, kiss, and drive their convertible forward, launching it into the canyon. The film freezes on the car mid-air, rather than showing the impact, but there is no plausible survival from that height. Their decision to die on their own terms turns the ending into a dark yet defiant statement about autonomy in a world that gives them no good choices. Bonnie and Clyde. Arthur Penn's crime film finishes with its infamous outlaw couple being gunned down in a planned police ambush. Bonnie Parker, played by Faye Dunaway, and Clyde Barrow, played by Warren Beatty, rob banks and stores across Depression-era America, becoming folk anti-heroes in the press. As their crimes escalate and their gang suffers heavy casualties, law enforcement organizes a sting with the help of a former associate. In the climactic scene, Bonnie and Clyde stop to assist a man whose truck appears to have broken down. Hidden officers suddenly rise from concealment and unleash a barrage of machine gun fire into the car. The assault is shown in graphic slow motion as bullets riddle their bodies, tossing them around the vehicle before it comes to a rest. Both die instantly, their story ending not with a romantic getaway, but a state-sanctioned execution. The sequence shocked 1960s audiences with its explicit violence and transformed how American cinema portrayed death on screen. Alien 3. In Alien 3, Ellen Ripley's story closes with her killing herself to prevent a new alien queen from being born. After surviving two previous xenomorph encounters, Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver, crash lands on a bleak prison planet and discovers that she has been implanted with a queen embryo. The company Weyland-Yutani wants to keep her alive long enough to surgically remove the creature and weaponize it, while the remaining prisoners and staff fear both her and the aliens stalking the facility. Once the xenomorph loose on the planet is killed, Ripley refuses the corporation's offer of safety. In the theatrical ending, she throws herself backward into a massive furnace as company men watch helplessly. As she falls, the chestburster queen emerges, and both Ripley and the creature are destroyed in the flames. Ripley's sacrifice permanently ends her arc and denies the company the weapon they crave. It is a bleak, sacrificial death where the longtime protagonist chooses extinction to save others and stop the cycle of exploitation. The Wicker Man. In the 1973 horror film The Wicker Man, devout police sergeant Neil Howie dies as a human sacrifice. Howie, played by Edward Woodward, travels to the remote Scottish island of Summerisle to investigate the reported disappearance of a young girl named Rowan. As he questions the locals, he discovers a pagan community that denies the girl's death but behaves suspiciously. Convinced a human sacrifice is planned to restore the island's failing crops, he believes Rowan will be the victim and tries to rescue her. In the climax, Howie learns he is the intended sacrifice, a virgin, a Christian, and a representative of the law, lured there by false reports. The villagers force him into a giant wicker effigy filled with animals and set it on fire while they sing a pagan hymn. Howie prays and screams as the structure burns, and the final shot shows the Wicker Man collapsing in flames against the setting sun. There is no ambiguity. The protagonist dies, and his faith offers no earthly rescue. By the way, if you're enjoying this type of content, I post videos like this regularly. Subscribing would really help me out. Dancer in the Dark. Lars von Trier's musical tragedy ends with its heroine being executed on screen in agonizing detail. Selma, played by Bjork, is a Czech immigrant in America slowly losing her sight from a hereditary condition, working in a factory to pay for eye surgery for her son so he will not suffer the same fate. When her neighbor Bill steals her savings and then begs her to kill him to end his own desperation, she shoots him during a struggle to recover the money. At her trial, she refuses to reveal the truth about the theft, fearing it would jeopardize the funds set aside for her son's operation. Found guilty of murder, she is sentenced to death by hanging. In the final sequence, Selma is led to the gallows, terrified and blind, with no music in her head until she forces herself to sing one last song to stay calm. The trapdoor opens mid-song, and her body drops as the rope snaps taut. She dies believing she has secured her son's future, though the audience never receives confirmation. The ending offers no reprieve, no last-minute rescue, only a stark, musical execution. Pan's Labyrinth. Guillermo del Toro's dark fantasy climaxes with its child protagonist being shot to death, even as she may ascend to a magical throne in the afterlife. Ophelia, played by Ivana Baquero, lives with her pregnant mother and sadistic stepfather, Captain Vidal, in 1944 Francoist Spain, where Vidal commands a fascist outpost hunting guerrilla fighters. Guided by a faun, she completes a series of tasks to prove she is the reincarnated Princess Moana of the underworld. For the final task, she must bring her baby brother to the labyrinth and spill his innocent blood, but she refuses to harm him. Vidal discovers her escape with the child, takes the baby, and shoots Ophelia, leaving her bleeding at the center of the stone maze as her blood drips into the ground. As she dies, the film cuts to an ornate underground throne room where Ophelia, now dressed in royal attire, is welcomed by the king and queen as their returned daughter. Whatever you believe about the fantasy, Ophelia's physical body is undeniably dead, making her ending as dark and tragic as any war casualty. Donnie Darko. In Donnie Darko, the troubled teen hero dies under a falling jet engine after choosing to restore the timeline. Donnie, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, is a disturbed high school student who begins seeing a figure in a rabbit suit named Frank, who tells him the world will end in 28 days. After a jet engine mysteriously crashes into his bedroom one night, and he survives only because Frank lured him outside, Donnie experiences a series of increasingly strange events involving time travel, manipulation, and the death of someone he loves. In the film's finale, Donnie sends the jet engine back through a time vortex, returning the story to the original night. This time he stays in bed, laughing quietly as the engine tears through his room and crushes him to death. Characters who died in the tangent timeline survive, each awakening with a haunting, dreamlike memory of something terrible that did not quite happen. Donnie's death is both literal and voluntary. He chooses to die so the people around him can live better lives, turning an initially opaque ending into a clear act of self-sacrifice. Atonement. Atonement ultimately confirms that both of its romantic leads die off-screen, long before the happy ending the audience thinks it sees. Robbie Turner, played by James McAvoy, is falsely accused of assault and sent to war in World War II, separated from his lover Cecilia, played by Keira Knightley. The film initially shows what appears to be a reunion between them after the war, but in a late twist, an older Bryony reveals this was invented. Robbie died at Dunkirk from septicemia before he could be evacuated, and Cecilia died soon after in the Balham Underground Station flooding during the Blitz. Bryony, consumed with guilt over her childhood lie that separated them, wrote a version of their story where they get the life she took from them. In reality, there is no reconciliation and no future for either character. Both protagonists are dead, and the only place their happiness exists is on the page of a book and in Bryony's imagination. The Green Mile. In The Green Mile, the story's central moral force, John Coffey, is executed despite his innocence. Set on a death row cell block in the 1930s, the film follows prison guard Paul Edgecombe, played by Tom Hanks, and inmate John Coffey, played by Michael Clark Duncan, a gentle giant convicted of murdering 2 young girls. As the story unfolds, Paul discovers that Coffey possesses miraculous healing powers and is in fact innocent, framed by the true killer. Yet the legal system cannot be reversed, and Coffey, weary of the cruelty of the world, agrees to go to the electric chair. In the execution scene, he is strapped to the chair and killed, while the guards who know the truth watch in anguish. Paul later reveals that Coffey's touch has left him unnaturally long-lived, burdened with decades of memory of an innocent man put to death. The protagonist John Coffey dies, and the film's darkness comes from the fact that justice does not save him. I Am Legend. Will Smith's I Am Legend ends with scientist Robert Neville sacrificing himself to save the remnants of humanity. Set in post-apocalyptic New York, Neville, played by Will Smith, is the last human immune to a vampire-like virus that has decimated civilization. He spends his days gathering supplies and recording broadcast messages. Hope other survivors will hear his pleas. When other humans finally arrive, a woman named Anna and a young boy, they also bring mutant creatures seeking to rescue a captive female that Neville had been experimenting on. Realizing that his experiments were morally indefensible and that the creatures possess more humanity than he gave them credit for, Neville must make a final choice. He arms himself with a grenade, brings the vial of cure close to his body, and detonates the explosive, killing himself and the surrounding creatures. Anna and the boy escape with the cure vial, and Neville's sacrifice ensures humanity has a fighting chance at survival. His death is both redemptive and tragic, giving meaning to his years of isolation and suffering. Come and see. Elim Klimov's 1985 war epic follows a boy named Fleora, who is slowly broken down by the horrors of World War II. Initially an idealistic partisan fighter, Fleora witnesses the systematic destruction of his village, the burning of a church full of civilians, and the massacre of his family. After being selected by German soldiers for a photograph, apparently the last mercy they show before execution, Fleora collapses, shell-shocked and apparently catatonic. He is rescued by partisans who find him wandering the ruins, essentially destroyed as a person. The film's final scene shows Fleora, now a hollow, traumatized ghost of his former self, marching with other partisans toward future battles. While Fleora's body survives physically, his mind and spirit have been obliterated by the systematic cruelty he has witnessed. The film suggests that what dies is Fleora's humanity, his innocence, and his will to live, a fate that the film implies is worse than death itself. He continues to exist, but the person he was is irrevocably gone. Brazil. Terry Gilliam's dystopian nightmare Brazil ends with its protagonist Sam Lowry reduced to permanent catatonia after torture and the loss of the woman he loves. Sam, played by Jonathan Pryce, is a lowly bureaucrat in a totalitarian surveillance state who falls in love with Jill, a woman fighting against the system. When he tries to help her escape, both are captured. While being tortured by an old friend, Sam experiences a vivid fantasy of rescue and escape with Jill. However, this fantasy is revealed to be a delusion. In reality, Jill is executed during arrest, and Sam is subjected to brutal interrogation. The final shot shows Sam smiling and humming to himself in the torture chair, completely disconnected from reality, his mind irreversibly broken by trauma. While technically still breathing, Sam is psychologically dead, a vegetative shell whose consciousness has been obliterated by the state apparatus. His fate is arguably darker than a quick death, trapping him in a nightmarish existence where he cannot even recognize his own torture. Carrie. Brian De Palma's adaptation of Stephen King's novel ends with Carrie White dying as her destructive telekinetic powers consume her. Carrie, played by Sissy Spacek, is a bullied teenage girl tormented by her religious extremist mother and mocked by her classmates. When she is publicly humiliated at prom by a cruel prank involving pig's blood, her latent telekinetic abilities explode into violent revenge. She uses her powers to seal the gymnasium doors and unleash a fire hose that kills or maims numerous students, electrocutes teachers, and sets the building ablaze. She walks home and battles her mother, using knives to kill her before destroying their entire house. As the structure collapses inward, Carrie is crushed beneath the rubble, her body caught between the weight of her own destructive power and her mother's house. The final image shows Carrie's bloodied arm reaching up from beneath the ruins. She dies trapped by the very forces, both supernatural and domestic, that defined her tragic existence, dying as violently as she lived. If you found this interesting, consider subscribing so you don't miss future uploads. Thanks for watching.